Okay, so we can begin with 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And then we will do the salutation to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so now we've been reading the Samadhi Sutta. This is the Majjhima Nikaya Sutta number 9. And we are now in section number 93. I'm not sure to what extent we have to use the call and response method for this sutta, because there's a lot of sort of the framework is just repeats from section to section. All we have to do is really look at the new material in each section. So section 93 begins in the same way as the previous section, by raising the question whether there's another way one could be a disciple, a noble disciple can be one with right view. And then Sariputta says there can be. Okay, and then, okay, we might as well do call and response. Maybe, who did I do last week? Purva? So maybe Kamal, is Thomas John, is he on? Okay, Kamal, are you there?
Yes, Bhante.
Okay.
I can do that.
Okay, but I'm going to be jumping around a lot, skipping over the repetitive material. Okay, so here we go. Yato ko avuso.
Yato ko avoso.
Arya savako jatincha pajanati.
Arya savako jatincha pajanati.
Jati samudayancha pajanati.
Jati samudayancha pajanati.
Jati nirodhancha pajanati.
Jati nirodhancha pajanati.
Jati nirodha gamaning patipadancha pajanati.
Jati nirodha gamaning patipadancha pajanati.
Etavata ko avuso.
Etavata tikho avoso.
Arya savako samaditi hoti.
Arya savako sammaditthi hoti.
And then the rest we've already done. Okay, so now Sariputta answers, when, O friends, the noble disciple understands birth, understands the origin of birth, understands the cessation of birth, and understands the way or practice going to the cessation of birth. To this extent, or in this way, friends, the noble disciple is one of right view. Okay, then he asks, I'll just go sort of translate this right off the spot. So he asks, and what friends is birth? What is the origin of birth? What is the cessation of birth? What is the way going to or leading to the cessation of birth? Okay, then comes the answer. Ya tesang satanam.
Ya tesang sattanang.
Tam hi satanikaye.
Tam hi sattanikaye.
Jati sanjati.
Jati sanjati.
O kanti abhinibhati.
Okanti abhinibbati.
Khandanam patubhavo.
Khandanang patubhavo.
Ayatananam patilabho.
Ayatnanang patilabho.
Ayang vuchat avuso. Oops. Ayang, oops, no. Ayang vuchat avuso jati.
Ayang vachat avaso jati.
Bhava samudaya jati samudayo.
Bhav samudaya jati samudayo.
Bhava nirodha jati nirodha. Jati nirodha.
Bhav bhav nirodha jati nirodho.
Ayameva aryo atangiko mago.
Ayamev aryo arthangiko maggo.
Jati nirodha gamani patipada.
Jati nirodhagamini patipada.
Sayati dang samaditi, and so on, samasamadhi.
Say yathidan samma ditti, and so on, samma samadhi.
Okay, so we start off first. We have the um, the relative pronoun ya, which is feminine singular, and so ya connects with jati or qualifies jati. So it's that which is birth. So he's defining birth. So that which is birth. And then we have this long clause here. Tesang satanan. So here we have the demonstrative pronoun repeated of those beings. So this is a way of saying, a way of generalizing the subject of any beings, of all beings whatsoever. Then tamhi, and then this is genitive, then tamhi satanikaye. So tamhi is a locative demonstrative pronoun. So literally in that group of beings. So Nikaya is a collection or group of beings. So when you have the repetition, it gives a sense of in any group of beings whatsoever, in this or that group of beings. So that would, putting this together, that which is the birth of these and those beings in this and that group of beings. So jati, then sanjati, almost the same meaning. It's just the word jati with the prefix sam. So we have to just say the birth, you could say the coming to birth. Okanti is from the prefix ava, which gives the sense of down. And in Pali, ava often gets sort of compressed and turned into o. So it's ava plus the verb kamati, which means to walk or to step or to move. So we have ava plus kamati, and the ava turns into o. So the full verb, the indicative verb, would be okamati, which means to come down. And so okanti is just a noun formed from that verb with the meaning, we could say, the descent. I guess there's a kind of implicit picture or metaphor here of the spirit of the deceased person hovering in the air. And then when the time is ready for them to undergo conception, they descend into the womb. So you could say descent. Abhinibhati means something like production. construction, making, not good. I don't know, we've run out of words for birth in English. Maybe generation is good. Not in the sense of X generation or generation X or the beat generation, but generation as the act of being generated. So these are like ordinary words indicating birth that would have been used in the Buddha's time. But then he uses two more technical doctrinal terms, kandhanam patubhava. This is the manifestation of the aggregates. So when conception takes place, what happens is that the five aggregates become manifest in the womb. And then ayatananam patilabho. This is the acquiring of the sense bases, the ayatanas. So in the case of a human birth, at the very moment of conception, the new being acquires the body base and the mind base. And then as the fetus develops in the womb, then there emerge the other sense bases, the eye, the ears, nose, and the tongue. So putting it all together, and then ayam fuchat avuso jati. So this is a Sunday form of ayam vuchati avuso jati. So this, friends, is called birth. So that which is the birth of these and those beings into this and that group of beings, they're being born, their descent, they're being generated, the manifestation of the aggregates, the acquiring of the sense spaces. This is called birth. Then bhava samudaya, jati samudayo. So with this statement, this is rather interesting. In English, we would need a verb, but in Pali, you could almost treat this as a distinct sentence without a verb. And we have what kind of a case, what grammatical case? Bhava samudaya?
Ablative.
Right, right. Yeah, it's the ablative case, the ablative being used in the sense of cause. So because of the origination of bhava, of existence, there is sort of what's implied, say that there's almost implied the verb hoti. There is the origination of birth. In the normal formula for dependent origination, how does, what would we find in the normal formula to express this in the normal formula of dependent origination? How would that be expressed?
Bhava
Bhav,
Pachaya Jati.
Okay. Yeah, so in the usual formula, the 12-fold formula of dependent origination, we have bhava pachaya jati. Maybe we could understand also hoti to be implied here. So, and bhava pachaya is ablative case, and jati is nominative case. So through or with existence as condition, there is birth. And in this sutta, we have through the origination of existence, there is the origination of birth. So just two different ways of saying the same thing. And then you have the other side of this, bhava nirodha jati nirodho. So with the cessation, through the cessation of existence, there is cessation of birth. And in the usual formula for dependent origination, how would this be expressed?
Bhava Nirodha Jati Nirodho.
Very good, exactly the same. Exactly the same. Was that Suki?
No, sir.
Bante, Ivan?
Oh, that was Ivan. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah, so it's the same, exactly the same way. With Nirodha here, with the long A, again, this is the ablative case. And then we've met this over and over. This noble eight-factored path, this is the way or the practice leading to the cessation of birth. That is to say, or namely, right view through right concentration. Okay, then this paragraph here is repeating the same template that we've already had, so I'm not going to go over it separately. To get the explanation, you just go to a recording of last week's class. The only thing that's different is the subject. In the earlier class, that was Jara Marana, old age and death. Here, the subject is Jati, birth. Okay, now I think we can go through this sutta rather quickly. It seems like a long sutta, but it's pretty much everything follows like a template so that you could just sort of copy and paste, and then you just have to change a few words, and then you get the whole sutta. Okay, so here the only thing that's really different is I'll just highlight the different portion. So now we're in section 94. So kattamo panavuso bhavo,
Katmo panavaso bhavo,
kattamo bhava samudayo,
katmo bhav samudayo,
kattamo bhava nirodho,
katmo bhav nirodho,
kattama bhava nirodha gamani patipada.
katma bhav nirodha gamini patipada.
Okay, so what, oh friends, is existence? What is the origin of existence? What is the cessation of existence? What is the way leading to the cessation of existence? And then the answer is Tayo me, which means Tayo ime avuso bhava. Yeah, I think we didn't read this together. So Tayo me avuso bhava,
Tayo me avaso bhava,
kama bhavo, rupa bhavo, arupa bhavo.
kama bhavo, rupa bhavo, arupa bhavo.
Okay, so there are these three kinds of existence. There's kama bhava, which is existence in the desire realm or the sensory realm. Rupa bhava, existence in the fine material or form realm. And arupa bhava, existence in the formless or non-material realm. And then upadana samudaya, bhava samudaya.
Upadana samudaya, bhav samudayo,
Upadana nirodha, bhava nirodha.
upadana nirodha, bhav nirodho,
Ayameva aryo atangiko mago.
aryang ayamev aryo attangiko maggo,
Bhava nirodha gamani patipada.
bhav nirodha gamini patipada.
Okay, and then, okay, so through the origination of clinging, it's upadana, there is the origination of existence. through the cessation of clinging, there is the cessation of existence. And just this noble 8-factored path, that is the way, that is the way going to the cessation of existence. That is right view through right concentration. So any questions? Should have asked any questions. Okay, then we just go on. I think we do the rest of this sutta very quickly. So passage 95. So the new portion here is kattamang panavusa upadanam.
Katmang panavaso upadanan.
Kattamo upadana samudayo.
Katmo upadana samudayo.
Kattamo upadana nirodho.
Katmo upadana nirodho.
Kattama upadana nirodha gamani patipada.
Katma upadana nirodha gamini patipada.
Okay, so he's asking, what friends is clinging? What is the origin of clinging? What is the cessation of clinging? What is the way leading to the cessation of clinging? And then the answer comes that chatar imani avuso upadanani.
Chattari mani avaso upadanani.
So there are 4 kinds of clinging: kam upadanam, dit upadanam,
Kam upadanan, ditthupadanan,
silabat upadanam,
silabat upadanan,
attavad upadanam.
attavad upadanan.
So the 4 kinds of clinging: clinging to sensual pleasures, clinging to ditti, that's the views, clinging to silabbata. Yeah, this is the way it's sometimes translated: rites and rituals, ceremonies and rituals. But the original sense is sila as certain modes of conduct, and vata as generally it's understood to be like austere or ascetic practices undertaken through a vow. And the way this is explained in the Abhidharma and the commentaries, that it's the kinds of practices undertaken by the non-Buddhist ascetics, hoping to gain either heavenly rebirth or liberation. Actually, these are still practiced today. Even if you go on YouTube, and probably if you put into YouTube the search box, you put in Indian ascetics, Hindu ascetics, you'll find many, many little videos of ascetics practicing, undertaking these practices, like going naked, smearing the body with ashes, wearing maybe a necklace of skulls around the neck, well, a necklace of bones, carrying a skull in order to collect alms food with the skull, sleeping on beds of thorns, bathing in frozen, in ice cold ponds during the middle of the winter, maintaining the sacred fire, and so on. So those are some of the ascetic practices. And then the last is attavadupadana. So this is clinging to a doctrine of a self, a doctrine that affirms the self. In a way, silabat upadana and attavad upadana, these are 2 kinds of views as well, but they're separated out because they played a major role in the Indian scene of the Buddha's time. Okay, and then it's through craving that upadana originates, with the cessation of craving that upadana or clinging ceases, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way leading to the cessation of upadana. So any questions? Okay, then the next, now we come to craving. Oh, I didn't take the origin. Okay, so here Sariputta explains that it's through the arising of craving that clinging originates, with the cessation of craving that clinging ceases. And again, the Noble Eightfold Path is the way to cessation. So since he mentions craving or tanha, so in the next passage, he brings up the question, katama panavaso tanha,
Katma panavasu tanha,
katamo tanha samudayo,
katmo tanha samudayo,
katamo tanha nirodo,
katmo tanha nirodho,
katama tanha niroda gamani patipada.
katma tanha nirodhagamini patipada.
So what is craving, its origin, its cessation, and the path? And then he explains or he answers, Chayi me avuso tanha kaya,
Chai me avaso tanha kaya,
rupa tanha saddha tanha,
roop tanha saddha tanha,
gandha tanha rasa tanha,
gandha tanha rasa tanha,
potaba tanha dhamma tanha.
thotab tanha, dhamma tanha.
Okay, so chayi me. So here we have cha is 6, and then ime are these, and then the y is just put in as a kind of glide semi-consonant, just to smooth the movement from between the vowels, from to e. So chai me. So there are these 6 groups or classes of craving. And then the 6 types of craving are distinguished by way of the object. So craving for visible forms, craving for sounds, for odors, for taste, for tactile objects, craving for mental objects. Then feeling is the originating cause of craving. Cessation of feeling brings cessation of craving, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way to cessation. So any questions? Okay, so now the question comes up by way of what is feeling and so on. I'm just going to go through quickly. Okay, so then the answer comes that there are these 6 groups of feeling. Then we have, we'll take this, Chaku Sampasa Vedana. Yeah, okay, maybe we don't have to read together. Okay, so here we have feeling, and then it's described as Chaku Sampasa Ja. So this little suffix ja means born of or produced by. In this case, it's born of contact. That sampasa is contact through the eye. And then we have sota sampasa ja vedana. So here we have feeling born of contact through the ear. And then similarly, feeling born of contact through the nose, through the tongue, through the body, and through the mind. And then contact, Pasa, is the originating condition for feeling. And so with the cessation of contact, cessation of feeling, and then the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to cessation. So maybe somebody has a question, what is the difference between Pasa and Sampasa? Is there any difference? No, no real difference. It's just, I don't know why the prefix is used, but I found sometimes in the Pali of the suttas, when the term occurs on its own, it occurs without a prefix. And then, but when it occurs in a compound, the prefix is added. Another example is bojjhanga. What is the meaning of bojjhanga?
Factor of enlightenment.
Yeah, the factor of enlightenment. But then when enumerating the factors of enlightenment, does anybody know the first one in Pali?
Sati Sampochango.
Yeah. So here, when you combine bojjhanga with the factors themselves, then you get sati sambojjhanga. And similarly, dhammavicaya sambojjhanga, piti virya sambojjhanga, piti sambojjhanga, all the ways to upekkha sambojjhanga. So each one, from sati to upekkha, we always find sambojjhanga. So is there any difference between we have satta bojjhanga, the 7 factors of enlightenment, and then enumerated, each one is a sambojjhanga, but no difference. The 7 bojjhangas are just sati sambojjhanga, and so on. And similarly here, no difference between pasa and sampasa. Okay, we can move on next. And so now pasa is mentioned as the cause, the originating cause. So section 98 is expounded by way of the 6 groups of contact, chai, me, pasa, kaya. Then we have chakku sampaso, all the ways to mano sampaso. So there are the 6 groups of contact at the eye, and so forth, to contact at the mind base. Am I going too fast? Okay. Okay, now when the question comes up, what is the originating cause or originating condition for contact? The answer Sariputta gives is sal ayatana samudaya pasa nirodha, pasa samudaya. So the sal ayatana, the 6 sense bases, is the originating cause for contact. And so the next section raises the question, okay, we could read this together. Kattaman pan avuso salayatanam.
Katmang panavaso salayatnan.
Katmo salayatana samudayo.
Katmo salayatan samudayo.
Katmo salayatana nirodho.
Katmo salayatan nirodho.
Katama salayatana nirodha gamani patipada.
Katma salayatan nirodha gamani patipada.
Okay, so he raises the question, what friends are the six sense spaces? But notice here, this I should have pointed out, that even though there are six sense spaces, but here the number and the word ayatana are joined to form a compound, and the compound is treated as a neuter singular. So we have sa. Is Lauren on the call? Lauren? I remember there's some reason why in Pali we have, when the group is mentioned, we have cha. But when it forms into a compound, it turns into sal. And it's based on Sanskrit, something in Sanskrit. I don't remember what it was. I remember in an earlier class, Lauren had explained why we meet that change.
Bhante,
Yeah.
I think it is shad in Sanskrit.
It's what?
Shad. It is shad. Shad.
Oh, I see. That's right. It's
The sha becomes a sa. Is it? That's what I think.
in this way, with that, the S with a dot under it.
Yes, Bhante. Yes, Bhante.
Yeah, it's shad. So for some reason, and in Pali, when it stands alone, the sh gets turned into cha, so that we have cha, whereas when it forms into the compound, the sh of Sanskrit becomes the sa, and the d turns into an L. Does the d in Sanskrit have the dot under it?
Yes, Bhante. There is a dot on the d.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so in Sanskrit, it's shad, the D with the dot under it too. So in Pali, in compounds, it becomes sal. Okay, and then it becomes, we have the six, and then all of the ayatanas are joined together to form this is like a collective compound where all of the terms are joined and it becomes a neuter singular. So it's the six. That's why I think Venerable Nyanamoli used to translate this as the sixfold base in trying to conform to the Pali of using a singular. But to me, that sounds a little clumsy. Okay, so what are the six bases? What is their origin, cessation, and the path? And then here, the six bases are treated as a plural. And so we have the cha with that semi-vowel Y in between the A and the I. So there are these six ayatanas. And what are the six? The eye as a sense space, the ear as a sense space, the nose sense space, the tongue sense space, the body base, and the mind base. And then we have Nama Rupa Samudaya Salayatana Samudaya.
Nam Roop Samudaya Salayatan Samudayo.
The Nama Rupa Nirodha Salayatana Nirodha.
Nam Roop Nirodha Salayatan Nirodho.
And then this, yeah, okay, we'll just explain this. Okay, so with the origination of nama rupa. Almost difficult to translate this, so I'll just leave it. With the origination of nama rupa, there is the origination of the 6 sense bases. With the cessation of nama rupa, there is cessation of the 6 sense bases, and this noble eightfold path is the way leading to the cessation of the 6 sense bases. Okay, so that brings us into section number. So any questions? Any questions on the above? Okay, so then we come to section number 100. Again, we take just the distinguishing portion of the section. So kattaman panavuso nama rupam.
Katmang panavuso nam rupang.
Kattamo nama rupa samudayo.
Katmo nam rupa samudayo.
Kattamo nama rupa nirodho.
Katmo nam rupa nirodho.
Kattama nama rupa nirodha gamani patipada.
Katma nam rupa nirodhagamini patipada.
So he raises the question, what is nama rupa? What is its origin, its cessation, and the way to cessation? Okay, so now he's going to explain nama rupa by breaking it down. Because nama rupa is a compound of nama and rupa. So he's going to break this compound down into its 2 portions and then explain each of the 2 portions separately and then join them together. So we start off with the explanation of nama. So Vedana Sanya Chetana.
Vedana sanya chetana.
Paso Manasikaro.
Phasso manasikaro.
Idang Vuchat Avuso Namam.
Idang vachat na avaso naman.
So here we have feeling, perception, volition, contact, and attention. So this is called, friends, nama. And then Chatari Cha Mahabhutani.
Chattari cha mahabhutani.
Chatunancha Mahabhutan. Excuse me. Chatunancha Mahabhutanam.
Chatunanche mahabhutanang.
Upadaya Rupam.
Upadaya rupang.
Idang Vuchat Avuso Rupam.
Idang vachata vaso rupang.
So here we have the 4 great elements. Here we have the word Bhuta, but it's being used in the sense of dhatu, the sense of elements. So the 4 great elements or primary elements. And then we have something called Upadaya Rupa, the form that is dependent on. Here we have a absolutive Upadaya, which is being used in a somewhat, almost like an adverb, in the sense of dependent on. The material form dependent on the 4 great elements. And Chatunancha Mahabhutanam, this is the genitive plural. So the form which is dependent on the 4 great elements, this, friends, is called Rupa. So we have the primary Rupa, the 4 great elements, and then the secondary or derived material form. that which is dependent on the four great elements. So that is rupa. And then he continues, iti idancha namam,
Iti idancha namang,
idancha rupam,
idancha rupang,
idang vuchat avuso namarupam.
idang vachata avaso namarupang.
And so iti is thus, this nama and this rupa, this is called, friends, namarupa. And then with the origination of vijnana, which we translate consciousness, there's the origination of namarupa. With the cessation of consciousness, the cessation of namarupa, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way to cessation. Okay, so any questions here? And I want to take just questions related to the Pali language, not to get into the sort of philosophical implications of this.
Bhante, yes, just one quick question. So the reading of the Pali seems like vijnana is not part of nama. Is
Yeah.
that the proper reading?
Yeah, in the sutta way of explanation, because we usually find nama rupa occurring in the formula of dependent origination or in some other exposition, which is sort of girded from below by dependent origination, like this sutta. So in that case, because vijnana is the condition for nama rupa, so vijnana is not included in nama rupa itself. But in the commentaries, maybe this even goes back perhaps to the Visuddhi, to the Patisambhidamagga, I'm not sure. But certainly in Visuddhimagga and commentaries, in the explanation of Namarupa Paricheda, the distinguishing of Namarupa in the practice of insight meditation, then the 5 aggregates are divided between Nama and Rupa. And in that case, the aggregate of material form, the Rupa Kanda, is equated with Rupa, and the other 4 aggregates are identified with Nama. So from that perspective, where you're taking the 5 aggregates as the basis for division, then we put the 4 mental aggregates in Nama, including Vijnana.
Thank you, Bhante.
So any other questions? Okay, so now we come, yeah, go on.
But a question from the previous section. This is Chakku Sampasa. So how do we break this word? I mean, is it, how do we explain the word? Is it a collection of compounds or?
Let's see. Chakku Sampasa. I think this I think this would have to be a Tapurisa compound. It certainly is not a Bahubihi compound because the suffix ja is not an independent noun. Yeah, I think it would have to be a Tapurisa compound. But I'd have to like consult some of the grammar books on that. But certainly it's not. Yeah, please.
Bhante, the suffix ja, that is the suffix. So can it be an avyayi bhava compound, the adverbial compound? Because
I don't
we
think
have that
so. Yeah, I don't think so. Because the adverbial compound, I believe, always occurs as a neuter singular.
Okay, Bhante.
But here it's the compound is functioning as an adjective describing Vedana. Yeah, my guess is that it would be a tapurisa. Okay, shall we go on? Okay, so now we come to section 101. Okay, so we take just the analysis of vijnana. So katamang panavaso vijnanam,
Katmang panavaso vinyanang,
katamo vijnana samudayo,
katmo vinyana samudayo,
katamo vijnana nirodho,
katmo vinyana nirodho,
katama vijnana nirodha gamani patipada.
katma vinyana nirodha gamani patipada.
Okay, so what is, again, consciousness, its origin, cessation, and the way? And then the answer comes by enumerating these 6 chai me avaso vijnana kaya,
Chai me avaso vinyana kaya.
chakku vijnanang. Did we just do this? I'm getting a little.
Okay.
Did I do it?
Not yet, Bhante.
Oh, okay. I'm getting old. Okay, so chai me avaso vijnana kaya. So chakku vijnanang. Okay, you could recite.
Chakhu vinyanang,
Sota vijnanang,
Sot vinyanang,
ghana vijnanang,
Ghan vinyanang,
jiva vijnanang,
Jivha vinyanang,
kaya vijnanang,
Kaya vinyanang,
mano vijnanang.
Mano vinyanang.
So there are these 6 groups of consciousness or classes of consciousness, and then they're just distinguished by way of the sense base: eye consciousness, ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, and mind consciousness. And then we have Sankhara Samudaya Vijnana Samudayo,
Sankhar samudaya, vinyana samudayo,
and Sankhara Nirodha Vijnana Nirodho,
Sankhar nirodha, vinyana nirodho,
and Ayameva Aryo Atangiko Maggo,
Ayamev aryo attangiko maggo,
Vijnana Nirodha Gamani Patipada.
vinyana nirodha gamani patipada.
And so forth. Okay, so with the origin of, again, one of those words so difficult to translate into English, with the origination of the sankharas, there is the origination of consciousness. With the cessation of the sankharas, there is the cessation of consciousness, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way leading to cessation. Then we come to the next section where the subject becomes the sankharas. So katame panavaso sankhara,
Katme panavaso sankhara,
katamo sankhara samudayo,
Katmo sankhara samudayo,
katamo sankhara nirodho,
Katmo sankhara nirodho,
katama sankhara nirodha gamani patipada.
Katma sankhara nirodha gamani patipada.
Okay, so then he raises the question, what friends are the sankharas? What is their origin? What is their cessation? What is the way leading to the cessation of the sankharas? And then he gives the answer, tayo me avuso sankhara,
Tayo me avaso sankhara,
Kaya Sankaro, Vachi Sankaro, Chitta Sankaro.
Kaya Sankharo, Vachi Sankharo, Chitta Sankharo.
So there are these three sankharas. So the three are the bodily sankhara, the vachi sankhara, that's the verbal sankhara, and chitta sankhara, the sankhara of the mind. So those are the three sankharas, which are explained in the Abhidharma and commentaries as the volitional activities or karmic activities expressed either through bodily action, through speech, or remaining purely in the mind. And then with the origination of ignorance is the origination of the sankharas. With the cessation of ignorance, there's the cessation of the sankharas, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way to the cessation of sankharas. So any questions here?
Bante,
Yeah.
quick question. So in paragraph 101, the Mano-Vijnana, is it suitable to understand this word include Mano Dhatu and Mano-Vijnana Dhatu?
Yeah. In the Abhidharmic way of analysis, that would be the case. Or in terms of the 18 elements, that would include both Mano Dhatu and Mano Vijnana Dhatu.
Thank you, Bante.
Bante?
Yeah.
When explaining the 12 links here one by one, for example, what is tanha, what is vedana? The answer sometimes is tanha kaya. I mean, taime, taime tana kaya, taime vedana kaya. So
Yeah.
it has a kaya there, but some of them do not have a kaya, like Jataro Upadanani. Some of them has, so not all of them has kaya. What is that?
It seems that the word kaya is used in analyzing the factor by way of either the sense modality or the sense object. Yeah, by way of the sense modality, either with reference to the sense faculty or the sense object. But upadana is not analyzed or distinguished by way of the sense modality. Bhava is not analyzed by way of the sense modality. The sankharas are not analyzed by way of the sense modality. So I think it's only those that are distinguished by way of the sense modality that are designated by what that include this word kaya in the analysis. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so then continuing, we have with the origination of ignorance, there's the origination of the sankharas, with cessation of ignorance, cessation of the sankharas, and the Noble Eightfold Path, the way to cessation. Okay, so that brings up ignorance. And so the next section, now we come to passage number 103. So we have Katama Panavuso Avijja.
Katma Panavasu Avijja.
Katamo avijja samudayo.
Katmo avijja samudayo.
Katamo avijja nirodho.
Katmo avijja nirodho.
Katama avijja nirodha gamani patipada.
Katma avijja nirodha gamini patipada.
Yeah, this is an interesting section. Because if you are familiar with the Nidana Sangyutta, the collection of short suttas on dependent origination, the Buddha always traces the chain of causation back to avijja, to ignorance, but he never brings up the question, what is the underlying condition for ignorance? So it always ends with sankharas, and then the question comes, what is the origin of sankharas? Then the answer is given, ignorance is the origin of the sankharas. And then the process of tracing back ends there with ignorance. But here Sariputta brings up the question, what is the origin of ignorance? And we'll see what that is. Okay, so then he gives the answer first to the meaning of avijja. So yang ko avuso dukkhe anyana.
Yang ko avaso dukkhe ayanam.
Dukkha samudaye anyana.
Dukkha samudaye ayanam.
Dukkha nirodhe anyana.
Dukkha nirodhe ayanam.
Dukkha nirodha gamaniya patipadaya anyana.
Dukkha nirodha gamaniya patipadaya ayanam.
Ayang vuchat avuso avijja.
Ayang vachata vaso avijja.
Okay, so we start off with a relative pronoun, young. And young is a neuter singular, so it belongs with anyana, that which is. And then anyana is simply the negation of jnana. So jnana is knowledge or understanding. And then it's negated by the and then as typical in Pali, the n is duplicated. So it's lack of knowledge. Just like we have avijja, which is the negation of vijja. Okay, so that which is lack of knowledge in regard to dukkha. In Pali, words for knowledge take their object in the locative case. In English, we say knowledge of suffering, as it were genitive. But in Pali, it's something like lack of knowledge in relation to dukkha. Lack of knowledge in relation to the origin of dukkha. Lack of knowledge in relation to the cessation of dukkha. Lack of knowledge in relation to the practice leading to the cessation of dukkha. So this is what is called avijja, ignorance. And then we have the new element here, asava samudaya, avijja samudayo.
Asav samudaya avijja samudayo.
Asava nirodha, avijja nirodho.
Asav nirodha avijja nirodho.
And ayameva aryo atangiko mago.
Ayamev aryo attangiko maggo.
Avijja nirodha gamani patipada.
Avijja nirodha gamini patipada.
And so on. So the origination of the asavas, another one of those words, very difficult to translate. Let us some use influxes, Venerable Nyanamoli use taints, some use outflows, Anyway, different opinions. I'll just use the word asava. So the origination of the asavas, that is the origination of ignorance. With the cessation of the asavas, there is cessation of ignorance, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way to cessation. So any questions here? Okay, anyway, then we can come to 104. Okay, so now he's going to bring up the question, what are the asavas? So katamo panavuso asavo.
Katamo panavaso asavo.
Katamo asava samudayo.
Katamo asav samudayo.
Katamo asava nirodho.
Katamo asav nirodho.
Katama asava nirodhagamani patipada.
Katama asav nirodha gamini patipada.
Actually, I think the T here is a mistake because he's asking the question himself. It's not that it's not the end of a quotation. And what's interesting is that the question phrases asava in the singular, even though we know that there will be several kinds of asavas. And then comes the answer. So what is the asava? What is its origin, its cessation, and the way? And then the answer comes. Tayo me avuso asava.
Tayo me avasu asava.
Kam asavo, bhavasavo, avijasavo.
Kamasavo, bhavasavo, avijjasavo.
So there are these three asavas. So what are the three? The asava of sensuality, the asava, following the commentary, it's the asava of craving for existence, and the asava of ignorance. So ignorance is an asava, which in turn gives rise to the avijja, which is the first link of dependent origination. Then with the origination of ignorance, there is the origination of the asavas. So ignorance is the condition for the asavas, and the asavas are the condition for ignorance. And so there's a kind of vicious cycle involved there. And then with the cessation of ignorance, there is the cessation of the asavas, and the Noble Eightfold Path is the way, the cessation of the asavas. So any questions here?
So, Bhante, there is the Thi asava which has been mentioned at some other places. While there are three asavas which have been mentioned here. So, how do these two mentions go together?
You mean with you mentioned the dit asava?
Yes, Bhante.
Yeah, I think it probably begins in the Abhidhamma Pitaka. That a fourth asava is mentioned. Dit asava, which is the asava of ditti, of views. And so it combines dit asava. Yeah, in the suttas we find 4 floods, which are the same as the asavas, but including the ditti Oga, dit oga. So we have kam oga, bhav oga, avij oga, and dit oga. The flood of sensual desire, the flood of craving for existence, the flood of ignorance, and the flood of views. So probably on the basis of that scheme, the compilers of the Abhidharma and later texts added dit asava.
Okay, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, and then we just have the concluding paragraph here. Yeah, even though we did it already, but just to wrap everything up, we might as well do it one more time. Yato ko avoso arya savako,
Yato ko avaso arya savako,
evan asavam pajanati,
evan asavang pajanati,
evan asava samudayam pajanati,
evan asav samudayang pajanati,
evan asava nirodham pajanati,
evan asav nirodhang pajanati,
evan asava nirodha gamani patipadam pajanati.
evan asav nirodha gamini patipadang pajanati.
So sabaso raganusayam pahaya,
So sabbaso raganusayang pahaya,
patiganusayam pativino deva,
patigahanusayang pativinodetva,
asmiti diti man anusayam samuhanitva,
asmiti ditti man anusayang samuhanitva,
avijang pahaya vijang upadeva,
avijjang pahaya vijjang upadetva,
dit eva dhamme
ditthev dhamme
dukas antakaro hoti.
dukkhas antkaro hoti.
Yeah, maybe I'll explain this first and then we take the last closes. Okay, so beginning, when, O friends, when, O friends, a noble disciple thus understands, I'll use the plural, the asavas, thus understands the origin of the asavas, thus understands the cessation of the asavas, thus understands the way leading to the cessation of the asavas. So then we have sabaso is completely raga nusayang pahaya, having abandoned the latent tendency to lust. Probably this what's intended here is sensual lust. So having completely abandoned the latent tendency to sensual lust, then pati ganusayang pati vinodetva, having dispelled the latent tendency to aversion, then asmiti ditti mananusayang samuhanitva, having uprooted the latent tendency to the view and conceit I am, having abandoned ignorance, having given rise to clear knowledge in this very life, Diteva Dhamme, he is Dukas Antakaro Hoti, one who has made an end of dukkha, of suffering. Yeah, that really should be one sentence. And then etavata piko avuso.
Etavata pikho avaso,
Arya savako samaditi hoti.
arya savako sammaditthi hoti,
Uju katasa diti.
uju gatas ditti,
Dhamme avecha prasadena samanagato.
Dhamme avecha pasadena samannagato.
Agato imang sadhammanti.
Agato imang sadhammanti.
Okay, so a tavata means something like in such a way, to this extent. So in this way, to this extent, O friends, the noble disciple is, and remember here, samaditi is a bahubihi compound describing Arya Savako. So it's not the noun right view, but it's an adjective, one of right view. So in this way, the noble disciple is one of right view. Who then asa is the genitive, whose view is ujugata, straight, who has a straight view. And then dhamme avecha prasadena samanagato, who's one who is possessed of this unshakable confidence in the Dharma, and agato imang saddhamma, who has come to or arrived at this good Dhamma. Okay, so any questions on this paragraph?
Bhante,
Yeah.
Bhante, if I'm not wrong, the word sabba can be declined in all the three genders. The suffix so, Bhante, is that the distributive particle? Can you please explain that particle?
Yeah,
So?
yeah, that's a good point. Sabaso. Wow, your grammar is very good. I think it's called a distributive suffix. Let me just check. Yeah, I'd have to do a little research on that. But sabaso, it turns sabba into an adverb. I think in Sanskrit it would be sarvasa.
Yes, Bhante.
And it takes on the sense, in this case, completely, entirely.
Okay, Bhante.
You know, you'd have to look into a grammar to see whether it's classified as a distributive form.
Okay,
But I know that
yes, Bhante.
it functions like an adverb entirely, completely.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, so yeah, go.
This patighanu sayang pati vinodetva. So patig is mentioned, so to say, instead of dosanu sayang pati vinodetva.
Yeah,
How?
for some reason, in some places, the text use the word dosa, meaning hatred. Other places they use vyapada, meaning ill will. In other places, patiga, which has a sense of aversion or irritation. I don't know whether there's any difference between them, but maybe patiga is used because it maybe includes subtler forms of displeasure, whereas dosa seems to have a strong meaning, like real hatred. And vyapada, again, a stronger meaning, ill will. But patiga, like maybe if like I have mosquito buzzing around my ears and I feel annoyed by the mosquito, I don't have dosa or hatred towards it or ill will towards it, but there's that annoyance or irritation. So maybe patiga has a wider range than dosa. But technically they would be identified.
Bhante,
Yeah.
in my Sadama, in my reading, I've seen true knowledge and deliverance kind of like together, and I never really quite understand what deliverance really mean.
With Saddhamma?
Is that yeah, so true knowledge and deliverance. I have seen those two terms always together, and I never really understand what deliverance mean. Is that deliverance from defilement, deliverance from suffering? Exactly what is it? But for some reason, it's always mentioned. Yeah, always mentioned with true knowledge.
Yeah, that's Vija Vimutti. That's Vija Vimutti. So Vija, true knowledge seems a little bit odd to me, even though I think I follow Venerable Nyanamoli in using it. Because if it's not true, then it's not knowledge. So now I would prefer clear knowledge. So this would be the knowledge that destroys the defilements. And Vimutti is, now I would use liberation. Bhikkhu Nyanamoli used deliverance. That was the choice of the older translators in Sri Lanka. But now I prefer liberation. So clear knowledge and liberation. So it's the liberation of the mind from the defilements, the full liberation.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, let us take a break now. So now we complete this sutta. So the Sariputta finished speaking, and then the monks were delighted and they rejoiced. The monks were pleased and they delighted in the explanation of the Venerable Sariputta.
Bhante,
So, yeah.
is this the only sutta in the Nikayas that mentions through the origination of asavas, there is the origination of ignorance?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I believe this is the only one.
Thank you.
Okay, so let us, it's 2:27, 3 till, we'll take an 8-minute break till 2:35. Then we'll come back and then we will continue with the Metta Sutta. Okay, so now we come to the second part of the class of May 10th. And now we are in the Sutta Nipata, and we are doing the Metta Sutta, also known as the Karaniya Metta Sutta, but usually simply the Metta Sutta. And this is the first chapter, Sutta number 8. And I'm not using the Burmese script edition, but this is, I think, based on the Sinhalese script edition. Okay, so last time we took verse 145, in which the meditation of loving kindness actually begins with the last two lines of verse 145. And so this expresses in a very general way, so may all beings be happy and safe. May they all be with happy minds. And now with verse 146, now the text enumerates different types of living beings. So you can read together. Ye kechi pana bhutati.
Ye kechi pan bhutati. Ye kechi, yes, but
Okay.
Ye kechi pan bhutati.
Tasava tavarava anavasesa.
Tasava thavrava anvasesa.
Digava ye mahantava.
Dighava ye mahantava.
Majima rasakanu katula.
Majhima rasakanuk thula.
So the ye kechi is a generalized form of the relative pronoun, whatever. And then we have the rather unusual compound, pana bhuta. And then bhuta is joined with ati, so that the final vowel drops out here. Then the commentary gives not completely convincing explanation of this. So it says pana. So actually, you see the word pana means literally a entity with breath. Actually, originally it means breath. So if you know in yoga, they have pranayama. So that's the practice of controlling the breath. And so pana means a living being. And Bhuta also takes on the meaning of a living being. So you have two words with that mean a living being joined together. And so the commentary gives the explanation. First, it says that Pana themselves are Bhutas. So in other words, just two words are used to indicate the same thing, living beings. But then it gives another explanation distinguishing them. So it says that Pana are things that breathe. And so this includes those beings with all five aggregates who depend upon in and out breathing, sasa pasasa. And in contrast, Bhuta refers to those beings either in the formless realm or in the pure material realm that don't breathe. That doesn't sound so convincing to me. It seems to me that both words we use maybe just to fill out the meter. So we could just say Pana Bhuta as just living beings. Actually, maybe that's a good way to understand it. Take Pana with breath as the life force and Bhuta as a being. And so Pana Bhuta would be beings with a life force, or in other words, living beings. So whatever living beings there are, and then we have a disjunction Tasava tavarava anavasesa. Anavasesa means it's a negation of avasesa. Avasesa is a remainder, what is left over. And unavasesa means without a remainder, not leaving anything out. You say without exception. So whatever beings there are, and then ati is the verb to be. In this case, there are. So whatever living beings there are, without exception, then it distinguishes those beings as tasa or tavara. So tasa are things, literally it's things that tremble, and or we could say things that move, and tavara are things that are stationary, that are steady. So these would be, without exception, tasa va tavara, things that move and things that are stationary. But the way I would understand it would be things that are weak, that's tasa, things that tremble, and tavara, things that are strong. I just wanted to see how I rendered this in my translation. Yeah, I had whether frail or firm. So tasa is frail and tavara is firm. Okay, then continuing to describe the beings. Diga is long or tall, and Mahanta is great or large. Majjhima is middle, of middle size. Rasika is short. Anuka is subtle, fine, very small, and Tula is gross or large. So whatever beings there are, without exception, whether they are tall or short, large or small, gross or subtle, or in the middle of any of those pairs. So not long and short, but middle size, not large and small, but middle size, not gross or subtle, but of a middle level. Okay, then this continues into the next verse. Again, distinguishing different types of beings. Dita va, this is verse 147. Dita va yeva adita.
Dittha va yev adittha.
Yecha dure vasanti avidure.
Yeche dure vasanti avidure.
Bhuta va sambhavesi va.
Bhuta va sambhavesi va.
Sabbe sata bhavantu sukhitatta.
Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhitatta.
Okay, so now we have distinction of dita, those who are seen, and those who are adita, not seen. So we can understand this in different ways. Dita, those who are seen, could be beings or people that we have actually seen with our own eyes. And adita, those that we've never seen. All of the people that I've never met, all the beings I've never seen. Or it could be understood, maybe in a broader sense, those that are visible and those that are invisible. Then we have a distinction, ye dure vasanti and avidure. So vasanti means who dwell, who live. Dure means at a distance. In other words, far away. And avidure means not far away. In other words, nearby. So those who dwell at a distance and those who dwell nearby. Then we have Bhuta, another pair, Bhuta and Sambhavesi. So Bhuta are those beings who have come to be, who have already come into existence. And Sambhavesi are those who are, we'll make it simple, those who are seeking new existence, who have not yet come into existence, but who are seeking existence. This could be beings like who have passed away and they're in the, I understand this to be actually supporting the idea of an intermediate state. So the beings in the intermediate state, but maybe they're living in the so-called astral body and their karma is not yet matured for them to come into existence. But they are sort of waiting for the opportunity to open up, to come back into rebirth in one of the realms of existence. So those who have already been reborn and those who are waiting to take rebirth. And then comes the last phrase, which is in a way echoing the last phrase of the opening of the first line of the meditation. Sabbesata bhavantu sukhitata. Again, may all beings be of happy, literally of happy selves, or may they be of happy minds. Do you know why the Buddha put this line here the second time, even though he said the same thing up here? Probably it takes a monk to know the answer to that question. Can Venerable Mangala guess? Or Venerable Satyananda? I'll tell you the answer from my experience. When we recite this line, if we haven't been mindful, then in a split second, we start wondering, did we recite verses 146 and the first part of 147? And now we're concluding those verses? Or maybe we didn't recite those verses yet. That's what happens when, when you're reciting a sutta and your mindfulness slips and the mind is wandering, and you might be reciting these verses unmindfully. Then you recite Sabbesata bhavantu sukhitata, and then if you're leading the chanting, then you go back and you recite Ye Kechi Pana Bhutate, and the other monks know, our chant leader has been, his mind was wandering. Okay, any questions then?
Bante,
Yeah.
last time you explained Sampavesi as the
Future active participle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to avoid getting into that complexity. But this is, so I followed the commentarial explanation here. But K.R. Norman, in his editing of Geiger's Polygrammar on This would be section 193A. Let me just find it. Okay, so he says 193A. He says there are a small number of future particle forms in AC, as in Sambhavesi, as opposed to Bhuta. He mentions this at Sutta Nipata, verse 147. Yeah, I actually probably agree with Norman about that. So this is a future called a future active participle, having the sense of, okay, Bhuta, those who have come into existence, in Sambhavesi being future, those who will come into existence. So you could take it in either way.
Bhante, if we take it the second way, then the intermediate state does not, it does not indicate the intermediate state, right?
I think it still would indicate the intermediate state, because if a being, as soon as it passes away, the next moment comes into existence, then there would be no way to designate it as a being who will be coming into existence. So it seems that this would be referring to those still who have not yet come, who are in that intermediate state or that astral plane, who have not yet come into existence, but who are about to come into existence or who will come into existence when conditions are right. It just removes the sense that they're seeking new existence, but they're in that intermediate state, awaiting the conditions to come into existence. Any other questions?
Oh, Bhante, about the repetition of the Sabbesata Bhavantu Sukhitata,
Yeah.
could it be serving the practical purpose of you set the intention to wish, then upon contemplating all these beings, then you concluded by sending the wish again?
Yeah, that's a good point. And also, yeah, another way to understand it, the explanation I gave was just a sort of joking explanation. But here in 145, when it's starting off with the universal wish of loving kindness, then one goes through the different distinctions, specific distinctions amongst beings. And then with the last line, then one sort of wraps it all up and universalizes it again. Okay, I think, are there any other questions, or should we go on to the next verse? Okay, so now we go to verse 148. Naparo parang nikubeta.
Naparo parang nikubetha.
Nati manyeta katachi nang kanchi.
Nati mayetha kathanchi nang kanchi.
Vyarosana patika sanya.
Vyarosana patag sanya.
Nanya manyasa dukam icheya.
Nana mayasya dukham ichhe.
Okay, so paro and parang, the two words are indicating like two different people. So one and another person. So we'll take the paro to be the subject as the one. And then the verb nikubeta, this is a middle voice form, third person singular in the optative mood. And it means the verb means to deceive. So, and then it's a negation. So someone should not deceive another. Or we say, let no one deceive another. Then again, na ati manyeta. Again, this is the middle voice, third person singular optative, negated, na. And ati manyati means to look down on somebody, to look down with contempt. So one should not look down on kanchi, on anyone. I think the nung and the kanchi just go together. And katachi is anywhere. So one should not look down on anyone, anywhere. Then biarosana patigasanya. So biarosana, it's an unusual word, but it has the sense, the meaning is that of anger. And I believe the case would be ablative. Probably I believe it's a neuter noun, biarosana. So this would be a true ablative. But then patigasanya would be a shortened ablative representing patigasanyaya. So patika is aversion and sanya is perception. So because of it's hard to put this literally, because of a perception that is governed by aversion. You know, when you see somebody that you dislike, your body tenses up and there might come a surge of discomfort and aversion towards that person. You're not necessarily feeling anger towards them, but a kind of surge of ill will or irritation arises with that perception. So because of anger and because of a perception influenced by aversion, then we have here again, na. Anyam anyasa dukam ichaya. One should not wish, the verb is ichaya. One should not wish, and dukam is, of course, pain or suffering. And then anyam anyasa is one, means towards one another. So because of anger and because of these perceptions influenced by aversion, one should not wish suffering for one another. So, any questions here?
Bhante?
Yeah.
Bhante, the shortened forms of words, are they common in poetry? Or to fit the meter? What is the purpose of that? We don't really come across shortened forms in prose, I guess.
I'm not getting the voice very clearly.
Yes, Bhante.
Okay, that's better. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Bhante, sorry for that. The shortened forms of the word, for example, here patiggasayaya,
Yeah.
the shortened form was patiggasaya.
Yeah.
So are these shortened forms of words, are they common in poetry? Because we don't really see them in prose.
Yeah.
Is it to fit the meter, Bhante?
Exactly to fit the meter. But there are some examples that one finds in prose too. For example, I think of anya vimuto. So anya is like final knowledge, vimuto is liberated. So probably the full form would be anyaya vimuto, liberated through final knowledge. But it gets shortened just because it's a common expression to anya vimuto, liberated through. Yeah. But it's more common in verse because it's the shortened form is used to fit the line into the meter.
Thank you, Bhante.
Okay, any other questions here? Okay, then I say it's 3 o'clock. So let us then stop here. And then next week, certainly we'll be able to finish the Metta Sutta. I've lost my Zoom screen. Are you on Zoom?
Yes, Bhante, we're here.
We're here.
Okay. Of course I lost it because I was on share screen. Okay, so let us end with doing the 3 bows to the Buddha. 1, 2, 3. And then
Bow
next
to
week.
Bhante.
Okay, next week we start in the Majjhima Nikaya, we start the Dvaita Vitaka Sutta, the 2 kinds of thoughts, and we'll probably finish up the Metta Sutta. Okay, so thank you all for joining.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.
Thank you, Bhante.